Rhythm and Bullets drops you into a wireframe shoot-em-up / bullet hell world where your mission is to defend the core from attack by using 2 ships to dodge bullets and shoot the approaching enemies. I can confirm straight away that it contains both rhythm and bullets, so it certainly lives up to its name, but let me go into a bit more detail. First though, thanks to the developers DB Creations for providing me with a review key for the game, but as always the opinions presented here are my own. There's no particular backstory to get into, so I'll jump straight into the gameplay. It's a fairly straightforward concept, although with a few challenging twists. You're placed in one spot, directly controlling 2 ships, one with each hand, and in effect they work more like guns, with the only difference being that while shooting you also have to manoeuvre them around to avoid being hit by bullets or incoming enemies. In front of you is a blue sphere, otherwise known as the core, which you have to defend, as once its energy bar is depleted it's game over. Waves of enemies appear, advancing and firing towards the core in time with the music, and you have to dispose of them before you become overwhelmed. It's here that one of the first twists arises, and that is that for your bullets to be effective, you have to change the colour of them to match the enemies that you're trying to shoot. You have 3 colours to cycle through, so even if you set each of your 2 ships to a different colour, you're still going to have a 3rd colour that you need to switch to at times, which is just enough to get you flustered and panicking as things become more intense. As you shoot and successfully hit enemies, you'll increase the multiplier and also the power and spread of your shots. Conversely, if you get hit too much, you'll lose your multiplier and go back to basic single shots. Another twist here where the rhythm part comes into play is that if you shoot on the beat, your shots become homing bullets that seek out the enemy, so even if your aim wasn't perfect, you're still likely to hit them. You can activate a brief shield on each ship, just enough to deflect incoming shots or push away enemy ships in a pinch, and also fire a shield busting shot, which is required against some enemies to bring down their shields before you can get rid of them. At the end of each level you'll face a boss fight of sorts against a large spherical enemy, a bit like a bad version of the core, where you'll need to use a combination of the skills you've learnt, dodging their attacks, deflecting bullets back at them to break their shield, then shooting them down with the right colour to weaken them. At random you'll also get some power-ups appearing, which can help you get out of a tight squeeze. These include time slowdown, rapid fire bullets, and also missiles which can be used to destroy enemies of any colour. And if it sounds like a lot to remember, that's because it is. At first, trying to do all these things at once is like patting your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time, and can be quite overwhelming. However, playing for longer, you gradually develop strategies and familiarity with the system, and muscle memory which goes a long way to making things seem fairer and more achievable. Having said that, I've found that when it all falls apart, it is sometimes possible to get out of a situation simply by spamming the buttons frantically to constantly fire and change bullet colours, although this isn't my recommended tactic, and it's certainly nothing to be proud of. The game offers up 3 different modes: Campaign, Endless and Relax. The main campaign is played out over 3 levels, each with a different background, whilst the Endless mode, where you're fighting for high scores, features those same 3 backgrounds plus 2 others, one of which is particularly festive and one with a bit of a PlayStation theme to it. The Relax mode lets you pick a background and allows you to spawn enemies and power-ups at will, and also lets you add and remove the music channels, which also synchronises with the background animation and changes your shot strength. To be honest, the campaign won't take you long to complete, probably no more than an hour once you've got the hang of things. Relax mode is fine for a little play around, but feels a bit redundant, and I can't see it holding anyone's attention for too long. The main meat of the game is in the Endless mode, and trying to get through as many increasingly difficult waves as possible to beat the high scores in the global leaderboard. As you can see from the footage, the graphics have a retro wireframe look to them, and it gives the game the feeling of playing on an old arcade machine like Tempest, or some of the Jeff Minter classics, albeit with no llamas. The backgrounds are vivid and colourful, with some animation going on, but are essentially static, in the sense that you're stuck to the same spot throughout the level. Now this is great for those prone to motion sickness, but I would have liked to have seen some movement throughout each level, even if it was just turning on the spot at certain times, or progressing forwards through a series of fixed waypoints after each wave. Another small gripe is that it's sometimes difficult to see the enemies against the backgrounds, although a nice little touch to help with this problem is that the core in front of you contains coloured lines pointing in the direction of incoming enemies to help you spot them. There are some settings to modify the bullet colours and make them a bit more colourblind friendly, which is always nice to see, although regardless of what setting you have, it's sometimes quite hard to know which colour bullet is active, as although it's shown in the outline of the ship, the colours of the ship itself tend to interfere a bit. You usually have to deduce it by looking at the two solid dots of colour either side of your ship, which show the unselected colours, or by firing off a few shots just to remind yourself which colour is active. You can unlock a few different skins and models for your ships, but these are purely cosmetic and all play the same, although in theory some of the thinner ships might be fractionally better for dodging bullets. So for a game based around the rhythm, how does it sound? Well, the soundtrack is limited, with different music for each of the 5 levels, but what's there is really catchy, with a nice mix of original synthwave and electronic tracks. You've also got the slightly remixable versions in the relax mode if you want to change it up a bit. The sound effects are functional with a range of arcade sounding bleeps and bloops, and I like the little bits of electronic speech throughout the game. In terms of controls, the game only supports Move controllers, so if you've just got a DualShock then you're out of luck. There's quite a few controls to remember, but the buttons are mapped well enough. The trigger fires, the Move button activates a shield, the cross and circle buttons cycle through colours, and pressing the trigger and Move buttons together fires the shield breaker bullet. As the movement of your ship is mapped one-to-one to your controllers, it feels a bit more like waving a pair of guns around in the air rather than controlling 2 spaceships, as they don't really have any weight to them. Admittedly, there's not much that could be done about that, as adding any kind of drag or delay to the ships would make it frustrating to control. However, I'd love to at least have seen some little vapour trails coming from the ships as you move them around. One thing I did find was that playing this game for a certain amount of time can actually become quite tiring on your arms, and could be used as a pretty decent arm workout. It might have been nice to have an optional one-handed mode where you can just use a single controller, even the DualShock perhaps, to control one ship, although this might become too challenging without some tweaks to the enemy patterns. So what did I think of the game as a whole? Well, overall this is a small but well-formed package which I really enjoyed. There's not a huge amount of content, but what's there is very polished and fun to play, and the gameplay mechanics add some originality and keep things challenging. As mentioned before, it won't take you long to complete the campaign mode and unlock everything, so keep in mind that a lot of the replayability comes from chasing high scores. It would have been nice to see a few more levels included, particularly in the campaign mode, but bearing in mind the asking price is a very reasonable £8 on the UK store, I'd say it's pretty good value for money, and a great game for those pick up and play gaming sessions.